But in any event, we've got really a different format this morning with our program. We're going to have a fireside chat with the person who is identified as Atlanta's godfather of angel investing, Sig Mosley. Sig is the president of Imlay Investment, which is the personal investment company of John Imlay. John Imlay, you might remember, is the iconic business leader who turned around and made management science of America, MSA, one of the real icons of in the computer industry, computer software industry. That company itself has probably spawned more business leaders and more entrepreneurial companies in Atlanta than anybody else. In any event, Imlay Investments is the personal investment company that was formed, and Sig has been the president of that company since its founding. We're going to explore that more in our program this morning, but it goes without saying that if there was anybody that is really tuned in over the last 20 years of venture investing, it would be Sig Mosley. We decided to have, instead of just Sig making a presentation, to do kind of a fireside chat format without the fireside. The person that I wanted to interview and get our discussion going with Sig is in fact a very important personage in our technology community himself. Dr. Michael Cummings is on the faculty now at the business school at Georgia Tech, their College of Management, and has been there since July of 2001. He now teaches both graduate and undergraduate courses and is the CIA of the College of Management. He serves on the advisory board of a number of new technology companies, has a really distinguished career. He was, among other things, kind of going in reverse order, the chief marketing officer of Equifax, where he really developed their internet business strategy. He's been a professor of marketing at Emory University. He was associate dean and helped found the University of Miami's School of Business. Before, earlier in his career, he was involved with Intelsat and the FCC, both in Washington, really at the birth of a lot of technology. One of the things, though, that many of you will remember Mike for was that he was the director of the Georgia Center for Advanced Telecommunications Technology that sits on 14th Street. For quite a number of years, that was the centerpiece of technology development in Georgia. Please welcome Mike Cummings&S.
Thank you all very much for coming today. This is a real privilege for me. I've known Sig for many, many years, but I've been kind of out of touch for a while. And this is a great opportunity to kind of get inside the man and see what makes him tick and why he's been so successful. Mike said a lot of things about me. The two things that you should probably stand out is I'm old and I've been around this community for a while and have a hard time holding a job because I keep moving from one thing to another. Well, the thing that really intrigued me about talking to Sig today, you know, Sig's been on a lot of panels and he says things, but one thing about Sig that you'll find out is he doesn't like to talk a lot about himself. He doesn't like to brag. So that's why Mike, I think, wanted me up here to make sure that we got to the real essence. And I think the curiosity for all of us is, you know, a man who's been so extraordinarily successful, you know, how did he do it? What makes a guy like that tick? And are there things that ordinary people like us can learn from him and maybe help make us more successful? So Sig, in order to get this started, I want to take you back a little bit and tell us a little bit about your background. Where did you grow up? Where did you go to school?
I grew up in Jasper, Georgia, and for those of you who don't know where due north of here, kind of in between Canton, you got Canton, Jasper, LJ, Blue Ridge there on Highway 5. And what we are famous for are two things. One is Georgia marble, because that comes from that area. But two, we also have the world's largest Jeep dealership in Jasper. and they do it by the old-fashioned way of you walk in, you get a price, and the price you pay. Don't try to negotiate. Even if your cousin owns it, it does no good. I tried that and it didn't work. So,
in fact, you've had such an amazing track record. You know, it's one thing for somebody to be successful for a short period of time. You know, you could argue that you were in the right place at the right time, luck, some other factors, but you have had extraordinary success over a very long period. In fact, when I started looking into other people who had similar track records, the only one that I could think of was Bernie Madoff. Now, I'm hoping that we're not going to find anything else out, but I don't think we are. But at any rate, you know, you learn a lot from your successes. So tell us, kind of distill your experience at MSA, and you know, what were your key learnings that when you came out of MSA, you say, I look back and these were really key things that affected my career, affected the way I look at business, the way I look at things?
well, part of it is just the amount of effort you put into it. You know, when I grew up, my parents had always said, you know, when you do something, do it right. You know, and that applied to work or whatever. You know, don't worry about where you're working 40 hours or 20 hours or 80 hours. You have a job, do the job. And I think that had been something that had always stuck with me, in that I really, when I do something, I do it. I don't worry about how much time it's going to take. I like to do it and do it well. And unfortunately, that also can create a few problems along the way, because it's hard to delegate things at times, because you know, you tend to want to be sure it get done right. And I think working with numbers, having always been, I didn't know until my junior year in college for sure what I wanted to do. I knew I liked numbers, but I wasn't sure what I wanted to be, a mathematician, an actuary, or what. But when I got up to Big Imlay, I took my first accounting course. I decided right then and there I liked accounting. Now, it was challenging that first year, because in the summertime I worked in the bank in my local in Jasper. And unfortunately, bank accounting is like reverse of business accounting. Because what is a debit in business is a credit in the bank. And so trying to jump back and forth during the summer created, but that's the kind of thing you just work with. So I got where I was very good with numbers. In fact, I tell people today when I look at business plans, don't talk to me about the numbers. Talk to me about the model. Talk to me about the concept, about how you're going to do it. I can make numbers show anything you want them to show. Just tell me what you want, and I'll get them there. You know, they may not make sense, but they will get there. So I do it. Numbers are the very last thing that I look at in a business plan, because really the model and the concept and being able to grasp that and to show that you really understand what you do. So all of that came out of MSA. But in August of 1990, we opened the Imlay Investment Outlet in the building we are in now in Resurgent Plaza. Been there the whole 21 years. Loved the building. It was close enough to John where John could look out his window and kind of see where I was, so he knew where I was all the time. And so we had, we began that. I spent my first 2 years really mainly working on buying muni bonds and then trying to find money manager to manage the public side of the investment. Because really what we did was we divided our money up between the public and what we called the venture or angel investment. So we didn't even know what we were calling it at the time, because angel wasn't a concept that had been given a title yet. So we had taken a tiny piece of our money to put into the angel side, but all the other money we sent onto the public side. So as of today, I manage 19 money managers. In addition, I have a $20 million foundation, because our foundation had grown from like about 10 million to 22 million over the 20 years. And then we were going to do the angel investing. And the first angel investment we did was actually in an ex-MSA employee by the name of Ben Dyer. Ben had been the founder of Petrie Software, but we still believe in Ben and what he was doing. So in 1990, we made an investment in a company called IntelliMedia.
Well, Sig, when you took this deal with John, I mean, this is a big step. I mean, you'd been in a corporation before, you'd worked for KPMG, you were sort of the standard company guy, and now all of a sudden you're on your own. And certainly managing the standard investment portfolio, I could see would be sort of a relatively easy transition. But here you are, starting to do something that they didn't even have a name for, this thing called angel investing. I mean, were you concerned at all? Did you feel like you knew what you were doing, and how did you figure out what to do?
Of course not. We had no idea what we were doing. It was just something we knew we wanted to do. Because, like I say, MSA we had been here for 20 years plus, and we had hired a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of would-be entrepreneurs, a lot of young people we had trained. We were a great training company too, for companies, for people. We trained them and then they would go other places. But the community had always been good to us. So we just knew what we wanted to do, but we had no idea what we were doing. ATDC was just getting off the ground. Well, it's been off the ground, I guess, about 10 years at that point. So we had to get more involved in the ATDC. We had to figure out more about what was happening in the community. And then we had to begin to try to find how we found companies who wanted to have investment. Now, having had the vast MSA network, I think that is one of the things that had really helped me be successful over the years, because I have had the vast network of people. At some point over the period of time, we have had over 200 CEOs or COOs in companies around the world that have come out of MSA, and they've been over 100 companies that have come out of MSA some way, indirectly or directly, however. And so that network of people always help us find opportunity. It also help us evaluate deals. When I get into a deal that I'm not sure about the technology, particularly software, I have any number of people that I can call and get help on it.
That network is absolutely important. Speaking of networks, tell us a little more about your relationship to John Imlay, and how important has he been to your success?
Well, John has been my success in the sense that, he and I developed a very good relationship early on, and over the 21 years at MSA, I worked closely with John for probably 18 of those. The first year or two, it was funny, he was in and out of the company. He got fired twice and hired 3 times. So I stayed there the whole time. I just kept my head buried in the accounting department. I knew when to shut my door and when not to.
You've had a couple of real home runs, several real home runs that are sort of just marquee type investments. So let's start with ISS, Internet Security Systems. What did you learn from that?
Well, that was an interesting one, because is probably the best example of another team where the entrepreneur, Chris Kraus, knew what he did know and he knew what he didn't know. And he realized very early on that he didn't know anything about building a business or running a business, and that's not what he wanted to do. He wanted to be on the technical side of the business. Therefore, he brought in Tom Noonan very early. Tom was actually an ex-MSA person.
Oh, he was.
And so that is where we have our connections there. And that is, I can assure you, that is one of the reasons we invested in ISF, because we knew Tom, we knew what he was capable of. But that was a story of where Tom walked in, he and Chris came in to talk to John and I, telling the story about what ISF was. And this was in the early commercial internet days. And John kept saying, well, you got to go somewhere else and get money. And Tom finally just picked up his wallet and just threw it on the table, and out came about 40 credit cards. And Tom said, John, I have maxed out on every one of these cards. We have no money. We got to have some help to even be able to go look for venture money. And that is when we committed to help Tom and Chris out. And so there you learn that the team, however big the team, in that case it was like 2 people at the time, were very important. They do have complementary skills, and they work together. And Tom and Chris today are still best of friends. They have worked out real well together.
One of the things you hear about business all the time is that sometimes people learn more from their failures than they do from success. Tell us about one of your failures and what you learned.
Well, actually, I'll talk about two of them kind of together. It was back in the late 90s in the internet bubble days. One of them was selling underwear on the web. A little company called Slick Leagues. Had two great retailers. It was a gentleman and a lady. And I got to know both of them. They came from a retail marketing background. Now, I didn't like necessarily selling underwear on the web. That wasn't one of my first
It's not software, is it?
Not software. And you know, the web was still, we were still trying to figure out the web. But, you know, I looked at the two entrepreneurs, and I said, okay, if anybody can make that work, they can. Because they knew retailing, they knew what was needed. Well, good people are one thing. When you don't have a market ready to buy, that's something else. So they are a lesson there. And the biggest lesson is that, yes, people are the key. We have always said. But you also got to have a market that's ready to buy. Because what I have learned is that you can have the best people, you can have the best product. But if you don't have a market that wants to buy, it doesn't mean no beans that you have the other two.
I've looked at people who are successful, and you know, some people define success very narrowly. You know, how much money have you made? How many companies have you taken public? But I think it's the give back part that impresses me the most about you and the kind of person that you are, and what all of your colleagues said about you is that Sig is really a good guy, okay? Yes, he's very good at picking companies, very good at evaluating talent. He's a good numbers guy. But he's a good man, and he gives back. He's a man of his word. And I worked for somebody at Equifax that was successful on the money side, but I would argue was not successful on the give back side. This person was ruthless, ruined a bunch of people's lives, made misery of people's daily activities that was not necessary. And I think it's so important today to add that give back, that broader view. And you and John put that company together, not just to make money, but the idea was to help Atlanta, to help, you know, the Georgia community grow, to, you know, create jobs for people. I think that's extremely important. If people out here were sitting in the audience today who are either running companies or thinking about running companies, what would you say you would be looking for is the ingredients for a successful company?
Well, one, you got to have a market that's ready to buy. Key element.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And let me define that as the market may not be buying today, but you got to be able to show me that it's going to be willing to buy tomorrow. And a part of defining market, you also have to talk to me about competitors. Who are competitors today? I have said for a number of years, if you come in and tell me you have no competitors, you have just gotten a big X by you as a big negative. Because if you truly are going into a market that has no competitors, either you're way ahead of the curve, or you're going into a market that everybody else has figured out isn't a market. And I don't want to be in either one of those really necessarily.
Okay, Sig, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today. Extremely valuable, and you're such a great asset to the community. We really appreciate it. Let's give Sig a hand.
Thank you.